Hi, my name is Drea. I'm a psychic medium, and if you've never been here before, this is Honey Breaks and Ghost Stories. So, if you are interested in the paranormal and gardening, this is the spot for you. Today, we will be going into part two from yesterday's story. All of these experiences did happen to me. I was present, I was there for it, and I feel it's important to share these experiences, which is why I started doing this. Um, for now, we're going to take a honey break real quick, and we will be right back to jump into part two of yesterday's story. Thank you for being here. We'll be right back. Alright, so where we left off yesterday, my cousin's dad finally returned home after they moved out of those apartments. We honestly thought that chapter was closed, but honestly, that was just the prologue. We actually had no idea that an attachment would follow, and we definitely didn't know that my cousin's dad at the time would bring something darker. So essentially, let me explain to you what kind of man this is. Um, this man, he was special forces officer in the US Army. Essentially, that's the kind of role that takes you deep into things that most of us never see and honestly probably shouldn't see. He came back changed. It's the best way I'll put it. Not just about the way usually people talk about, but his personality fully shifted. He grew colder, more detached, but there was also like something else that came home with him that we really weren't fans of. The air felt different when he was around. It was really thick, kind of gross. It's kind of like that kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, but definitely full of something you can't see. So he kept his gear locked in a room in the basement. We were never allowed in there. I used to think it was pretty much just military stuff, classified weapon or papers, weapons, stuff like that. But the older we got, the more we realized it wasn't just what he brought back in his hands, it was more what he brought back in his spirit. Um, and that energy, it really just clung to the house. It wasn't great. But that's when this other spirit started showing up. He looked like he was about in his late 60s, older, stern, almost kind of a grandpa. He was always in the same position, though, just watching. He never interacted with me personally or my siblings. But my cousin, on the other hand, he was obsessed with him. And you could tell, it was quite obvious. Man, the first time I saw him, I was babysitting. My cousin and I, we were playing downstairs when I caught just movement out of the corner of my eye. I turned and he was standing there in the window, pale face, staring through, eyes locked, not on me, on my cousin. And it was pretty much like he'd been searching for him. I thought it was a neighbor, but it wasn't. I thought it was possibly somebody creeping around. Wasn't the first time we had an experience like that, but it wasn't. It was not human at all. He pretty much vanished the moment that we screamed. Like, he took us off guard. I wasn't the only one who saw him. My cousin saw him. We were both, nah, no. But it didn't really stop there. Sometimes when I was babysitting, the kids would run around. They would be loud. They would be kids. And just this loud booming voice would essentially cut through and tell us to cut it out. We'd freeze because there were no adults there, so who was telling us to stop? Um, and if you turn around pretty much fast enough, then you could catch a glimpse of him in the window, just kind of watching, really smug, kind of he wasn't really amused, but he was scolding us fondly. It was like a grandpa who was frustrated and really just angry with the noise, with the chaos. He didn't scare me though, the way that he scared everybody else. There was something about him that it didn't feel evil, it just felt more protective. That's what we'll go with. It felt protective. It was almost as if he was possibly related to my cousin, which I did find out later down the road. My cousin's grandfather had passed prior. It was his great grandfather, and I believe that's who I've been seeing since I was a kid, who is around my cousin. But the the worst part about this guy was really the disembodied voices. He'd whisper your name, call for a room when nobody was in. Sometimes it felt kind of like he was walking behind you, but not really. I never really told my cousin how much I noticed because I didn't want to scare him more. He also saw spirits, but the older he got, he shut that gift off, whereas I have opened mine up. Um, that was kind of just the beginning of what was going on, and it was kind of interesting because we didn't know what followed my uncle back from when he was deployed. We had no idea. And the basement just always had bad vibes. And it's rough to get into, but we're gonna get into it. Let's take one more honey break and then get into the last part of this video, at least. I'm sorry, it's a long one. I'm doing my best. We're good now. Alright, so last part of this part of the story. I promise you, it gets crazier. But it'll take up a lot of your time. So this older spirit, he was really just the beginning. Because while that man had his fixation on my cousin, there were two other spirits in that house, at least that I picked up on. I believe there were more spirits because they were attached to my uncle's tools that he brought back from that deployment. These spirits, though, they weren't curious. They weren't fun. They were quite dark. And I feel that they were dangerous in a way that we really didn't have the language for yet at that time because we were kids. The basement was pretty much where it all seemed to live, and it never felt right. Not once, like I've said. It was always eerie. It was always creepy. One of those spirits, he stayed in the back corner, back by the room. Always, you couldn't see him, but you could feel him. The second you walked near that room, the air would change. He wasn't loud. He wasn't playful. He was just there. And it was gross. We didn't like going into that back area. We made sure to stay away from that back area. The second one, though, he tended to cling to the bar, which wasn't really helpful for us because that was my uncle's bar. And we weren't allowed to touch it. But things would happen. Bottles would move, glasses would fall, they would break, we'd get blamed for it. You kids need to stop messing around, but we weren't messing around. We knew better. That man scared me, okay? I'll be honest. As a kid, he scared me. As an adult, that's a different story. But we were always getting blamed for it. We did try to tell the adults, but it got pushed past. It was brushed off as an imagination thing again. But, you know, that's really what happens when you're sensitive as a kid. The ones who don't understand dismiss it. But the thing is, I am sensitive. I've always been able to feel when spaces are off, when they hold more than just energy. And that basement, I wouldn't call it even haunted. I would say it was occupied and probably still is occupied by the spirits in that place. But that's just my opinion. We really didn't want to be down there. We didn't have a choice, though. That's where we were told to play. That's where we were told to hang out, entertain ourselves. It just really always felt like we were being watched. And not even just by the old man that loved my cousin. We were being watched by the things that didn't want us there. We did see shadows. They weren't tricks of light. We were constantly trying to debunk it. Electronics would turn themselves on. Toys moved. It was creepy. The family dog, he wouldn't even go downstairs. He'd sit at the top and kind of growl at it, or he'd just go sit at the top of the stairs and wait for us all to go upstairs. And like nobody believed us. Not because like it was insane. Not until later. But it was because one of those tools that my uncle kept locked away in the basement, something from his deployment, was gifted to my dad. And do I think he meant harm by it? Absolutely not. I think it was sentimental for him. It's just that energy followed us home. It was not fun. And that's when we learned that there might not just be two spirits there. There might be multiples. And things got really weird. But I don't know. Something followed us. I didn't like it. Our house became heavier. There was more activity. We already had spirits, but we knew who those spirits were. Like, we could talk to them directly. They had their things that they did. That was not a problem. It got to a point, though, where we needed help. And even though I'm sensitive and my mom's sensitive, we brought in a medium for something completely different. And it ended up just turning into this thing that was bigger than what it was supposed to be. But I'm actually really thankful because it was validated. But that part really is for next time. I've already kept you here for some time. But yeah, that guy in the basement, he wasn't alone. And, I mean, I really feel like once those spirits got a taste of what it was like to put themselves out there, they really enjoyed it. And that really sucked. It was so gross. The energy there is disgusting. But yeah. Now we'll get into the spirit that followed us to our home after my uncle gave my dad that gift. And I just want to say thank you for being here. I know. I'm sorry I suck, but come back for part 3. We'll have that ready here soon. Sorry this one's a long one. It's a doozy.